Welcome to Bible Highlighting.
All right, here we go. Bible lesson nuggets of wisdom that your Sunday school teacher probably never taught you. Let's get into it. Today we're talking about complaining, and our Bible verse is Philippians 2:14. Now this verse is a real challenge because it doesn't say do some things, and it doesn't say do most things. It says do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God. My wife and I used to play that song in the car for the kids, back when they had tape players, and we would all sing that children's song together, and it goes like this. Do everything without complaining. Do everything without... You know what? Hang on, let me just play a little bit of it for you right now.
Do everything without complaining. Do everything without arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God. Without complaining, without arguing, do everything.
So that's the kids' song we would play for them. It's got a great message and kind of a good beat and melody for the kids to enjoy and memorize. But you know, sometimes listening to a song like that for 4 minutes straight on a road trip, that can get to you. That's almost as bad as being trapped in a station wagon with no air conditioner on a 40-year-long family trip across the Mojave Desert with an Ecuadorian translator named Mojave. 6 shadowing, 5 shadowing, 4 shadowing. But why is God having Paul tell us this? Seriously. Is complaining and arguing that big of a deal to worry about? Does it really mean that much to God? Sometimes it helps to go all the way back to the beginning to get a better understanding about the things God's telling us today. So let's go all the way back to the book of Numbers, chapter 11, where we actually see God's people complaining and watch how God deals with this. That's going to give us a much better understanding of how God feels about arguing and complaining. Let me set you up for this story first by going back a little bit further to Exodus, when God rescues the Israelites and pulls them out of bondage from slavery in Egypt. God has just told Moses, "I want you to go tell Pharaoh, let my people go." So after 10 awful plagues, Pharaoh finally releases God's people. They start to cross the Red Sea. After Pharaoh changes his mind and starts chasing them through the walls of water at the parting of the Red Sea, God closes in the Red Sea on Pharaoh and his army and his chariots and squashes them all like tiny little bugs. So here are the Israelites on the other side of the Red Sea, and they're completely free now. But they're in the desert, it's hot, and they're all hungry. And there's a lot more than 5,000 people. Since this is before Jesus' time, there ain't no little boy with a basket of 5 loaves and 2 fishes to come along and save them. It's going to be tough. But first, let's get a better idea of just how many people we're talking about. In Numbers chapter 1, God has told Moses to count the number of men who are aged 20 and above ready for battle. He's not supposed to count the women and the children or the old people, just the guys ready for war. In Numbers chapter 1, verse 46, they finally get the official number, and that number is 603,550, and that's just the men of war. Now we can gently assume that each one of those guys probably has a wife or even a girlfriend to go home to at the end of the day, so you can definitely assume we have an additional 600,000 ladies as well. And we can also make a quick guess that every single family had at least 3 kids, more than likely more than that. When we consider reading in Exodus how fast these guys were procreating for 400 years when they were slaves in Egypt, it's astounding. God says at the end of Genesis, when Jacob and his family moved to Egypt to be with Joseph, they were 70 persons in all. So over the course of 400 years of slavery, those 70 grew to over a few million. They were having at least 6 to 8 children per household for 4 generations. Nevertheless, we're going to be very conservative and assume 3 kids for every household for this example today. So 600,000 men of war plus 600,000 ladies to accompany those men, plus 3 kids for each of those respective families. Without rounding, that's roughly over 3 million people, conservatively.
Did you say over 3 million people?
Yes, that's a lot of mouths to feed, sir. Now, in our day and age, with the word billions being thrown around and trillions of dollars in national debt, 3 million doesn't sound like a whole lot. So let's put this into perspective. What's the population of Dallas, Texas? It's right around 1.3 million people. Okay, that's less than half of the Israelites that came out of Egypt. No problem. We'll just add in the population of Fort Worth, which is less than 1 million. Now our count is a little over 2 million, and we're still short. If we throw in the population of most of San Antonio, we finally get a little over 3 million people. Okay, that should change a lot in how we see this biblical event, because we can imagine the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and the Metroplex of the city of the Alamo, San Antonio, joining together to leave Egypt, cross the Red Sea, travel through the desert to go be with God and worship Him on Mount Sinai with Moses. We see it a little better. Now, before we get into this story, I'd like you to be able to apply it to something that you're able to relate to so that you can understand it better. Try thinking of this story as a dad who's able to take his whole family out of school 2 weeks early, all pile in the family station wagon, and travel across the desert with an Ecuadorian translator named Mojave. You are a member of the family of God, and he is Daddy-O. You don't need to worry about the hotels, lodging, or the food because Dad has everything taken care of, starting with an endless supply of graham crackers. Yeah, you know he has everything under control because he has just executed 10 miracles with the principals, the school district, and all the teaching staff to get you released from school, set you free, and take you on a family bonding trip. Now have a graham cracker and let's enjoy this. Okay, with that in your imagination, now let's jump into this Bible study, Numbers chapter 11. Verse 1. Now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and His anger was aroused. Okay, so we observe God is not at all pleased with complaining. Let's keep going. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. Oh my goodness, look at what's going on. The people complain, and not only does God get upset, He reacts immediately by sending fire down from heaven to burn up and kill some of them on the outskirts of the 3 million people. I mean, what is the deal? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not teaching that God will kill you if you complain today, but now that Jesus has come, our relationship with God is completely different. God is still holy, and He still hates complaining. But God's wrath and fury for that has already been poured out on Jesus at the cross. And today, we're living in the reality of the gospel of substitution because Jesus traded places with us. Here's what I mean. When God looked at Jesus on the cross, He was seeing you and punishing all that evil as if Jesus was guilty of committing all your sins, so that when God looks at you today, He only sees Jesus, and He treats you as if you are His one and only perfect Son. The relationship between God and man today is way different than what it was in the Old Testament. But God's feelings towards sin, or something like arguing and complaining, has never changed. This historical lesson is just giving us a better perspective on how God feels so that when we're tempted to gripe, argue, or complain, we choose to avoid it because we now know how it makes God feel. Let's keep going. Verse 3. So he, Moses, called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them. I think it's funny that Moses feels like he has to nickname the place where they got their bums kicked. If your hometown football team ended up losing to the Philadelphia Eagles or the 49ers, would you give a nickname to the field where you got stomped so bad that you never forgot that defeat? I don't know, just food for thought. Okay, verse 4. Now the mixed multitude, hold on, I'm actually thinking when it says mixed multitude, it probably means the mixture of men and women, old and young, and everyone with self-control, and those without. A way of including everybody in the whole group. All right, verse 4. Now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept. And on this word wept, I think of like a whining crybaby. But you listen to it as we read it. Tell me what you think. They also wept or complained again and said, Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up. There is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. You know what that sounds like? A fully grown teenager executing perfect form of Olympic-level complaining. Moms, dads, next time you hear something like that, just try this response.
Son, I'm going to have to politely ask you to refrain from the full verbal expression of the sensations you experience from yielding to your intense cravings.
Okay, God just delivered an endless supply of a food source. Let's take a look at this manna stuff that they're griping and complaining about. Verse 7. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its color like the color of bdellium. Exodus 16:31 also describes the manna with a little bit more detail, and the house of Israel called its name manna, and it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Like graham crackers. Verse 8. The people went about and gathered it, the manna, ground it on millstones, or beat it in the mortar, cooked it in pans, and made cakes of it, and its taste was like the taste of pastry prepared with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp in the night, the manna fell on it. God just gave them an endless supply of s'mores, minus the marshmallows and chocolate, and graham cracker crust cheesecake, minus the cheesecake, and they're still griping and complaining. Verse 10. Then Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was greatly aroused. Moses also was displeased. Okay, not only do they have God mad at them, but these guys also have Moses mad too. Verse 11. So Moses says to the Lord, Why have you afflicted me, your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you have laid the burden of all these people on me? His whining is translated as, God, I feel like you're passing the buck onto me. Why are you making me deal with all of these guys' problems? Verse 12. Did I conceive all these people? Did I beget them, that you should say to me,
Carry them in your bosom, as a guardian carries a nursing child,
to the land which you swore to their fathers? Again translated, Moses is saying, These are not my kids. Parents, I know sometimes you can relate to that one. God, you're the only one that made them a promise to bring them out of slavery, take them to a land with milk and honey. Don't dump this one on me. You step up and you take care of this food problem. And friends, if we get down to brass tacks here, it's not just the Israelites moaning and complaining. It's Moses complaining to God about the Israelites complaining to him. Not a good situation. Okay, verse 13. Moses is still talking here. Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? For they weep all over me, saying, Give us meat that we may eat.
And now, translations of the Chronicles of Complainitations of Moses, Part 6.
Oh God, look at all these people. You got the population of Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio combined, and every single one of them is begging me for the equivalent of a Thanksgiving bird on the table, and we haveth not a Kentucky Fried Chicken or Chick-fil-A out here in the Arabian Desert.
and even if we did have a Chick-fil-A,
You know how long that line would be on a Saturday?
Moses continues his bellyaching in verse 14.
I am not able to bear all these people alone because the burden is too heavy for me. If you treat me like this, please kill me here and now if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness.
Oh my goodness, Moses, you might as well kill me, God. I can't do this.
What are you talking about? You are Moses! Pull yourself together!
So God's going to step in and relieve Moses of this emotional burden that he's carrying. The 70 elders, verse 16. So the Lord said to Moses,
Gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, that they may stand there with you. Then I will come down and talk with you.
Moses,
I will talk with you there. I will take of the Spirit that is upon you, and I will put the same Spirit upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it alone. Then, after I talk with you alone,
in the staff meeting,
you shall go out and say to the people, Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept
or griped,
in the hearing of the Lord.
Which basically means God is saying, all right, that does it. I've listened to this complaining long enough. Let's get back into verse 18.
For you have wept,
i.e., fussed and complained,
in the hearing of the Lord, saying,
sarcastically,
Who will give us meat to eat? For it was well with us when we were back in Egypt.
It was well in Egypt.
Now, many of us have heard our grandparents say something like,
You want to complain? I'll give you something to complain about.
Well, I've got news for you, friends. Your grandparents and great-grandparents were not the ones who coined that phrase or attitude. Listen to how God responds to all their fussing, griping, and complaining about needing chicken dinners on the family road trip in the desert because God's endless provision wasn't good enough for them. God responds in verse 18.
Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. Oh, you shall eat, not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because,
and that's the important word here, because,
you have despised the Lord who is among you, and have wept, cried, fussed, griped, and complained before him, saying, Why did we ever come up out of Egypt?
Friends, this is important that we understand this short lesson right here. Complaining about what you don't have breeds a lack of contentment for what you do have. Lack of contentment breeds disrespect for the one who takes care of you, and disrespect can breed despising. God doesn't want complaining because He knows it can lead to the dissolving of trust in the relationship that He wants to have with us. Also keep in mind, this is God just speaking to Moses alone right now. It's just a conversation between the two of them. Moses is about to have to go out and tell everybody the news of this staff meeting. Listen to the possible frustration and confusion Moses probably feels in verse 21. And Moses said, The people whom I am among are 600,000 men on foot. Yet you have said, I will give them meat that they may eat for a whole month? Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them to provide enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to provide enough for them? Some of you may be able to relate to this, but when God tells us to do something that sounds difficult, how often do we find ourselves making a strong case with an argument towards God of how it can't be done? I just don't see how that can be done, Lord. And that's why He's God and we're we. Because we can't see what God can see. That's why we have to trust Him. Now, this argument that Moses proposes erroneously sounds like, I hear what you're saying, God, and I love your generous heart, but let's do the math here. If McDonald's were to feed all of us as much as you're proposing, everyone would have to eat at least 2 quarter-pounders with cheese at every meal to make it come out of their nostrils. Those were your words, Lord, not mine. That's roughly 9,000 cows per day times, let's see here, what did you say? 30 days? That makes it 270,000 cows. Yielding approximately 600 pounds of hamburger meat per cow. That's 162 million pounds of hamburger meat. We don't even have that many cows. And you said you wanted to do this with little birds smaller than chickens? Do you have any idea how many birds that is? I hate to burst your bubble, Lord, but in my humble opinion, I think you undercalculated and overspoke. Hey, I'm just saying. Verse 23, And the Lord said to Moses,
Has the Lord's arm been shortened? Now you shall see whether what I say will happen to you or not.
Which is spirit sporting trash talk for,
What? You think I can't make that shot, Moses? You go out and you tell them every crazy-sounding thing that I just said, and watch what I'm about to do. Nothing but net.
So Moses went out, and he told the people the words of the Lord. And he gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tabernacle. Verse 24, So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tabernacle. Then the Lord took of the Spirit that was upon him and placed the same Spirit upon the 70 elders. But 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the other, Medad. Okay, so we got 2 guys here, Eldad and Medad, who didn't show up. Hold on one second. Let's get our Ecuadorian translator. Mojave, what does Eldad mean?
Oh yeah, that is something that means the dad.
Thank you, Mojave.
You bet, my friend.
And Medad is what I call myself in Spanish when I'm talking to my daughter. It's me, Dad. So we have 2 guys here that did not show up to the meeting at the tabernacle where God is going to distribute His Holy Spirit upon them. Continuing on from verse 26. And the Spirit rested upon them. Now they were among those listed, but who had not gone out to the tabernacle, yet they prophesied in the camp. Okay, so Moses was the only one God regularly communed with, and 2 guys running around prophesying in the camp? Well, that probably seemed very strange. Verse 27. And a young man ran and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. which should establish for us that if God wants to do something, even if you don't show up to the meeting, God is still going to get it done. Verse 28. So Joshua the son of Nun, maybe the only man in the Bible we know of that did not have any parents, Moses' assistant, one of his choice men, answered and said, Moses, my lord, forbid them. Then Moses said to Joshua, Are you zealous for my sake? Oh, that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. You know, I think it's also incredible foreshadowing on Moses' part, because now that Christ has come, God is able to put his Spirit on all who believe in him. You could say Moses was able to see great things 2,000 years ahead of his time. Verse 30. And Moses returned to the camp, he and the elders of Israel. All right, we're getting close to the end of the chapter. God has already called his game-winning shot to deliver the quail. Let's see how he delivers. Verse 31. The Lord sends quail. Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea and left them fluttering near the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. Ho, hold on a second. Let's get a visual perspective about what God said in the amount of quail he just delivered. If you were to walk from your house in one direction for a whole day, you could probably get about 10 miles. God is telling us you could walk 10 miles outside the camp in any direction and see nothing but quail. And they aren't flying away. They're fluttering about waist height and below. Why? To make them easy to catch. God is providing what they complained for.
Verse 32. And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, and gathered quail. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. The people, it seems, were obsessed with gathering as much quail as they possibly could. It could be in part from their intense craving mentioned in verse 4, because that was what they did for 2 days and a night. Their greedy endeavor resulted in he who gathered least gathered 10 homers. 10 homers was equivalent to just over 500 gallons.
That's a lot of quail.
I know, right? Let me give you a visual on this one.
For example's sake, if you could store all the quail gathered by just one man into 55-gallon rain barrels, all of the quail that was gathered for just one man for 30 days would fill up 10 of those rain barrels by the end of the month. And the Chick-fil-A cows were probably thinking it was their marketing plan that really worked. All right, so let's get back into verse 33. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattava, because there they buried the people who had yielded to craving. All right, so let's land the plane. If there was a moral to this Bible lesson, this is it. Complaining about what you don't have breeds a lack of contentment for what you do have. Lack of contentment breeds disrespect for your provider, and disrespect can breed despising. God doesn't want complaining because he knows it can easily lead to the dissolving of trust in the relationship he wants to have with you. Now keep in mind, kids, if you've got something going on in the house that might be bothering you, there's a difference in coming to your parents in a loving way and making your case known in a respectful manner versus just outright complaining. And if we adults find ourselves in similar situations in the workplace or among friends or church positions, in the same way, there's nothing wrong with presenting your case for something that's bothering you in a way that addresses the problem and offers a possible solution in a respectful way, but to simply complain is something God says we need to avoid. So let's wrap everything up as we reread our starting Bible verse with a new and deeper understanding of how God feels about complaining and what the heart of this verse might be telling us. Philippians 2:14. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God.
If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. Please hit that like button if you learned something new in a way that was interesting or made you laugh, or both. Also, as we're trying to grow the channel, we'd really appreciate you using that share button and let other people know about how we're trying to bring the knowledge of God to as many people as we can in a fun and interesting way. And please leave a comment below. Not only will that help this channel grow, but I would sincerely like to know what Bible stories are important to you. Just send me a request of any book, chapter, or even a small story that you'd like me to break down and create a study on. Last of all, not all these videos are the same. Some may be 20 minutes long and cover a full chapter. Others, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes at the most, covering just one verse. But hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can come back and join us as we all dive into the Bible and do our best to experience God's Word in a deeper way while enjoying spending time with God. I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast video. Y'all take care. God bless you. Bye.